Okay, let me introduce Alice. It's a pleasure to have Alice Barale here in Santa Cruz. Alice is an assistant professor at the University of Milan, Italy, and she is the author of 3 books. One book is on the melancholy of the image. Another book on Shakespeare in Warburg and Walter Benjamin, and another book is on the philosophy of color. And a 4th book is coming out in English, as already in printing, and the title is The Art of Artificial Intelligence, Philosophical Keywords. This is let me add only one line. This is a very specific thing related to my country, Italy, in which basically a scholar with 3 or 4 publications is still an assistant professor. It's just I'm ashamed to say that, but it is what is going on in Italy all the time. So you become associate professor with the 4 books and so on and so forth, because everything is so delayed in Italy that is just embarrassing. Alice, we are very happy to have you here, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to meet you all, and thanks again, Max, for this invitation. Actually, it's my first time in California, so I'm so excited. Today I'll try to tell you something about the art made with artificial intelligence, and in particular, I will try to address this question. Does AI represent a new chance for artists and more in general for our way of exploring and seeing the world, or does it rather represent a danger? Of course, the answer will be both. But I think that it is easier in some way to say why AI is a danger than showing how it can offer also new chances. So let's start with the dangers. You know that there is a big discussion about the risks of AI also in relation to the production of images and texts. In fact, you know that the type of AI that is mostly used today, that is deep neural networks, has an important feature that we should underline since the beginning, and that is that it doesn't follow a set of predetermined rules, instructions, as it was the case with the previous type of AI, the so-called good old-fashioned AI or symbolic AI. But rather it learns when it is put into contact with a large amount of data that can be images or sounds or texts. And when it is put into contact with this data, it learns to generate new data that are similar but never identical to the initial ones. And this implies, of course, more autonomy of AI in comparison to the old type of AI, because the AI learns to elaborate the data in a way that is partially autonomous from the human scientists. But it also implies a danger, because the AI learns, as we were saying, from our data, and therefore it tends also to reproduce all the schemes and patterns and biases that are inside this data. And this is very important. There are very important artists that have dedicated their works to this aspect, like Trevor Paglen or Hito Steyer. We are going to go back to them as well. They try to expose the fact that the data that AI generates are never neutral. They can appear to be neutral, but they are not. They are full of biases and ideological contents that come, of course, from the data on which they have been trained. Okay, But there is also another direction in which artists have gone recently. And this is the idea of showing that other uses of AI are also possible. To show that AI can be used in exactly the opposite way. So not to reproduce our biases and our usual ways of seeing the world, but rather to call them into question, to raise doubts about them. No? And this is the type of art experiments to which I have dedicated my research lately with a book that is coming out in these weeks. I have a PDF if someone is interested. So my idea is that in order to face AI, art can go in two directions. It can expose the dangers of AI, so the dangers of surveillance and the biases that it diffuses. Or, and this is the second direction, it can show that AI can be used in the opposite direction, to call biases into question. I will try to show you the second possibility through some examples that these are art projects that have been done recently. The first example comes from Mario Klingemann. Mario Klingemann was one of the first artists working with AI. In 2019, this work that he made was sold at the famous auction house Sotheby's. And this was one of the episodes that marked the entrance of works made with AI to the official art market. Maybe we can go back to this work later. But today I wanted to speak to you about this other artwork. It's called Aika. It's from 2023. And Klingemann says that it is a performative sculpture. In fact, you would not say so much that it is a sculpture. It looks more like a robot. It's a dog robot. And its name, Aika, means artificially intelligent critical canine, because it is an art critic. You can see from the monocle that it has on one of the sides, with which it examines the works that it finds in front of it. And these examinations that Aika makes happen in the form of a performance. So the public is there, and Aika moves carefully in front of the artworks, and it rotates its head in a very attentive way. And after that, it produces an analysis of these artworks in form of text. And these texts are printed through a printer that is located under its tail. Of course, it's a joke. They're sort of paperproof. But what does it mean? Because it cannot mean that art critics are useless, no? And that everything they say is poop. In fact, Klingemann says that the worst thing that can happen to an artist is that nobody talks about his work or her work, no? So art critics are important. And we understand that the meaning is not this if we consider what Klingemann says to be one of the inspiration sources of his artwork. And that is a very interesting character that we find in a novel by the writer Douglas Adams. Probably some of you already heard about him. The novel is called Dirk Gently Holistic Detective Agency. And the character from which Aika is inspired is this electric monk. That is an electric monk. This is very interesting, I think, in the context of this investigation. The electric monk is a device that was invented on a remote planet to save the inhabitants of that planet from a very particular type of labor, that is the labor of believing. We can read together the description. The electric monk was a labor-saving device, like a dishwasher or a video recorder. Dishwashers wash tedious dishes for you, thus saving you the bother of washing them yourself. Video recorders watch tedious television for you, thus saving you the bother of looking at it yourself. Electric monks believed things for you, thus saving you what was becoming an increasingly onerous task, that of believing all the things the world expected you to believe. So the electric monks spare the inhabitants of the planet the labor of believing all what the world expects them to believe. They are like a dishwasher for believing, so to say. But in the novel, this attempt of creating a machine that believes instead of its creators causes a lot of disasters, because the inhabitants of the planet leave some very important decisions to the electric monks, and the electric monks decide in a very bad way. And this leads to very bad things that happen. And moreover, the particular electric monk from which the novel starts has proved to be a defective one, so he starts to believe things at random. And this also causes a lot of adventures and troubles to the protagonists of anything. But I think we should stop for one moment on this idea of AI as something that saves humans from labor, because maybe you know, but this idea is actually at the origin also of the first invention of the word robot. No, the word robot, probably you already know, was invented in a play by Carocci in 1921. He's a Czechish playwright, and in this play there is a scientist who invents these machines with human aspects in order to work instead of humans. No, robots in Czechish means worker, and eventually these robots rebel against this destiny that was chosen for them, and I don't spoil you the end. But anyway, here the work is, you see, is intended as a physical work. There is a clear social inspiration inside this play, no? While in Adam's novel, the work that the electric monk takes over is the work of believing, right? And in particular of believing what others expect you to believe. And you can see clearly that also here there is a critical invitation. No, you cannot spare yourself this labor. You cannot give up and become indifferent to decisions, because otherwise the electric monks will start believing for you and make a disaster. So Aika inherits this critical inspiration. But how? What does Aika do? Let's go back to Aika. Aika tries to evaluate these works that it sees, and it tries to judge the pictures, and then it produces these judgments. And I asked Lindemann to see some of these judgments, because they are not public. Because I was telling you that Aika is intended as a performance. So what matters are not the texts that it produces, as like its treasures, but the way it performs in front of the public. And Lindemann gave me some of these judgments, and these texts are definitely weird, because Aika makes some huge mistakes in identifying what is represented in the pictures. For example, in the case of this picture, it thinks that the faces are hands, and from this mistaken identification, he goes on. He starts with very, very long and very rhetoric discourses about this thing that he identified. This is very funny to read. So again, why? What is the sense of creating such a stupid art critic, or at least an art critic that gets things so wrong? Now, the answer, I think, is in the way Aika behaves. In the presentation of the project, Lindemann writes that in an age of visual overload and shrinking human attention, there seems to be an opening for machines that pay attention. So the focus of the project seems to be really on the attention that Aika shows while it examines what is in front of it. And humans, this is the message of the work, should recover this attention. It is not a chance that Aika is a dog, not only a robot, but also a dog. So machines and dogs have this in common, perhaps, but they show a different perspective. And by doing this, they also show humans that it is necessary for them to return to this moment of observation, to the moment of attention. online you can see, you can find a Twitter profile of Aika, and there are some maxims. And one that I like says, observe the world around you with the intensity of a terrier tracking a scent. So now this message of using AI to pay a different attention to the world is something that is also present in other works made with AI. I'll give you another example that I like very much. It's a project by an artist called Sofia Crespo. She's from Argentina. And since a few years, she's doing this project of representing nature through AI. She says that her aim is to write a natural history book that was never written, that never was. No? Here you can see some examples. In fact, some of these pictures actually look like an old natural history book because the background is kind of yellow and old. But the animals inside are different because they are animals that don't exist. So again, why? What is the sense of this? Because you don't need AI in order to represent imaginary animals. No, this has been done through centuries. Let's think of Middle Ages. No, I will try to show you the sense of this project through this particular work by Sofia Crespo. It's called Critically Extant. And for this work, Sofia Crespo asked the AI to represent a number of endangered species. This is why the work is called critically extant. They are animals that whose existence is in danger. And the AI has searched for information about these animals on the web. And the result is what you can see here. It's a group of very strange animals, full of mistakes. Again, these are some of my favorite ones. But why did they come out so strange? There is a very precise reason for this, because there is very little information on the internet about these animals. No, there are no pictures of them, or very few, and the AI needs a lot of data, as we were saying, in order to learn how to identify and also represent data. No? And therefore, it produced wrong animals. So through the errors of AI, the artist can say something important. She can say, look, we think we know everything about nature, but of nature, we always represent only certain aspects. No, we have many pictures of little dogs and kittens, but we lack pictures of many other species and many other parts of nature. And there are aspects of nature then that we don't usually look at. We need to overcome our biases, our fixed ideas about nature, and focus on what we forget, what we hide in nature. Because what we hide and forget, perhaps, is also what we are destroying, what we are not taking care of. So the eye becomes an instrument to take care of forgotten aspects of reality. And this can happen not only in relation to nature, but also in relation to some important parts of our human world. I give you another example that comes from a novel by Ross Goodwin called The Wonder Road. It's from 2018, so really a long time ago for the AI readings. But it is interesting in this context because Goodwin really uses AI in order to explore a part of his country. In fact, he puts a camera on the top of a car, and he drives this car from New York to New Orleans. And the camera has two types of AI inside. One type is able to classify what is being filmed, and the other type is able to convert this information into a text. And then the text is printed through a printer inside the car. Now, what is interesting of this experiment is that a surveillance camera, because what Goodwin puts on the top of the car is a surveillance camera indeed, no? So one of the most dangerous instruments that AI produces. Here you can see some of the authors and the artists that dealt with this problem. So a surveillance camera is transformed into something radically different. In fact, if we look at the descriptions that the eye gives of the landscapes through which the car drives, we see that these descriptions are quite different from the ones that a human would give, because the eye notices some aspects of these forgotten places that we would never have noticed. This is the very beginning of the novel. And then here is really the beginning. It's strange and it's interesting. And then all the descriptions start. I let you read them. But you can see from all these descriptions that the eye is really trying to make sense of what it feels. And sometimes there is not enough time because the car is going fast. But anyway, it seems also that the observer has come very near to what it is observing, maybe too near, no? So that the normal perspective is lost. And this is because the eye gives importance to aspects and details that we would never notice, no? And so the eye allows the traveler to get closer to things, like a sort of flaneur, if we want to use Benjamin terms. Of course, the flaneur is the human, not the machine, no? But the machine helps the traveler to overcome their cliches and pay attention to different aspects of reality. Now, Goodwin explains that one of his models while in writing this novel was the book that Tom Wolfe dedicated to the Merry Pranksters. Of course, you know this already because we are in California. So the Merry Pranksters were a musical group that in the early 60s made a journey from California to New York on this very colorful old school bus with a video camera on the roof of the bus to film and record what they said were the pictures and the sounds of a real America. And they took a lot of drugs, so we know, because they allowed them to perceive the world in an intensified way. Now, what Goodwin is saying is not that we should beg to take drugs again, but rather that AI can be for us what drugs were for the Merry Pranksters. That AI can allow us to perceive some aspects of reality that otherwise would remain out of reach. And he uses a concept that is very interesting, that of hallucination, because this is also a technical term in computer science. Computer scientists say that AI produces hallucinations every time that it interprets the data in a wrong way, no? And this is interesting because recently a German artist and filmmaker, Ito Steyer, I was telling you about her at the beginning, she has taken a very hard stance against this dreamlike or hallucinatory character that many of these AI-produced images have, because she argues that the hallucination or the dream is used by the companies that produce AI in order to charm people, no? To drive them away from the real state of things, no? But here in Ross Goodwin, this element of hallucination or dream has exactly the opposite function. It allows new aspects of the real to gain importance. No? It allows what had been forgotten to be seen again. No? So you see the different uses that can be made. Of course, this result doesn't happen on its own. AI doesn't produce this effect on its own. This happens only through an interaction between human and AI, and it is quite a difficult interaction. And with this, I come to the last part of my talk, because, you know, when Ross Goodwin's book was written, ChatGPT or GPT-3 had not been invented yet. And what's happened with the most recent forms of AI, like text-to-image models. No, you know, all these models in which you can insert a word or a phrase, and you obtain a certain picture, and then the picture is not right, so you give another phrase, you put it prompt, and you obtain another. So it's a sort of dialogue. And with ChatGPT, of course, ChatGPT also has the name of a chat inside its name. So what happens, according to my point of view, is that this dialogic character of AI is becoming more and more strong, no? And so, but as philosophers, we should ask one question in front of this. Is it a real dialogue? Because I think this is the main question that we should ask. Is the dialogic structure of AI enough in order to provide a real dialogue, a real interaction? Of course, the answer is no. There are some conditions in order for a real interaction to take place. And in order to study this question, I started to investigate some theater plays made with AI, because I was very interested on the fact that AI seems to be connected with theater from its origin for two reasons. So the first reason is the one of dialogue that we were saying, no? Of interaction and dialogue. And the second reason is the ability of AI to imitate human beings, no? This is a curiosity, but in fact, one of the first chatbots in the 60s, called Eliza by Weizenbaum, was called Eliza from the protagonist of a drama by Bernard Shaw, no? Eliza Doolittle. She's a poor woman who sells flowers, and she's taken by a linguistics professor in order to make an experiment. So this professor teaches Eliza how to speak and behave like a perfect high-class woman, and the experiment is quite successful, and then the plot goes on. So anyway, and this chatbot, Eliza, that was invented in the 60s, was able to answer all the questions as a very believable psychotherapist, no? This is also interesting because this use of AI for psychotherapy is also increasing in some ways today. But to go back to theater made with AI, I will give you 3 examples now. The first is an example in which the dialogue, according to my point of view, is not a real dialogue. The second one is an example in which the dialogue becomes a real dialogue. And the third is not an artistic example. It's an example from a project that I'm doing at the University of Milan with 2 colleagues, in which we are trying to make ChatGPT write a theater play. So first example is this one. It's called Una Isla by this theater company from Barcelona, Agrupación Señor Serrano. It was performed in 2023 in Barcelona. Then it came also to Milan, where I could watch it. This what is interesting of this show is that it was built from real conversations, real dialogues that took place between the members of the company and the ChatGPT. And then they transform this dialogue into the play. Basically, the members of the company during the show ask the AI to invent a story, to give some suggestions to invent a story. The AI comes out with a number of suggestions, and the members of the company represent on the scene what the AI is suggesting. So they invent a story together and they represent it together. But what is important is also that both AI and humans are present in this play only in the form of text. You can see there are these texts on the screen in the background. So white are the humans and yellow is the AI. And there is only one human actor on the scene. It's this woman in the foreground. She makes some stretching exercises, but she never speaks. So this is the dialogue going on in the form of text. And the AI starts to imagine that there is a shipwreck. And so the human of the story arrives to an island, and there is a big cave. Here you can see the big cave. But what matters the most is that on this island, there are different communities And there are some problems, of course, that have to be solved, because the castaway has to encounter these communities and has to integrate with these communities. And VI suggests a method. It says the group could show you their costumes and you could show them yours, and you will create a nice community. And the human, with some rights, as we say, your community is quite naive. And in fact, this good suggestion by VI failed, because the communities don't integrate. There is a lot going on, and then the island takes fire. And it's interesting what the human says at the end of all this failure, because it's naive to think that we will end up agreeing through dialogue as we will through conflict. And yet your programming forces you to dialogue. You could spend millions of years of non-stop dialogue without understanding that every speaker, all dialogue, and all language has limits. So this is a very important critique, I think, because the structure of dialogue on which ChatGPT is based is not enough. No? Finding the right words is not enough to solve a conflict. We know that. But we can ask a question. Is the dialogue represented in this play a real dialogue? Because when we watch this play, if you are interested, I can send you the link to the whole play. You feel very much that something is missing. There is the absence, a complete absence of words and gestures in this play. No, the dialogue is a dialogue only among texts. No, so what would happen if the human interlocutor stopped being only a text, and if the AI's linguistic dialogue was transporting into the human realm of voice, of gestures, of motions? Now, this is what happens, according to my point of view, in the second example that I wanted to talk to you about. It's called Improbotics. They are a theater company, an international theater company. They were born in England, but they are also from Belgium, from many parts of I think all of Europe for the moment. They are very international, and they have this project of making humans and AIs perform together on the scene. It's interesting because when they started, there was only this man, Piotr Mirovsky. He lives in London, and he started to perform in pubs with the AI, and the AI was represented only as a voice, as a robotic voice. And then he noticed that it was too difficult, the interaction was not good, and he created these small, very cute robots with small eyes, and he's called Alex, and he started to perform with Alex. And then there was a third stage that is most important for us, because they decided that the AI had to be performed by a human. So now we have human actors who all improvise together, but only one reads the lines written by the AI. So also the AI improvises. They all improvise together. They all have earphones, so we don't know which one is reading the lines of the AI. And we have to guess who is reading the lines of the AI. It's not completely difficult because the AI has this tendency of speaking out of context. So it doesn't really, what it says very often doesn't really make sense. But this is the game, because the human performer has to give meaning and sense with his gestures, his voice, and all to these strange sentences by the AI. And this is very interesting, I think, because the abstract dialogue that we found in the previous show is transformed, in this case, into a concrete dialogue, a human dialogue. So the suggestions of the AI are, so to say, transported into the realm of humans. And actually, in the previous show, Una Isla, one of the main problems of the suggestions that the AI gave, when it suggested, for example, the island, the cave, the shipwreck, there was an owl, there were a lot of imaginations, but all these imaginative ideas were all equivalent. In fact, there was a part of the show in which all these ideas started to be written so quickly on the screen that the public could not even see them, could not even read them properly. And now within robotics, the suggestion of the eye start to make a difference. They have to make a difference because they have to be performed by a human, no? So my idea basically is that it is up to the human to interact with the AI in order to give sense to what comes up, no? We don't find ready-made responses in the AI, but we have to get involved in this interaction and let something meaningful arise. And this is very difficult. I'm experiencing how difficult it is with this project I was talking to you about, with which I conclude, the one that I'm doing with my colleagues at the University of Milan. These are my two colleagues. One is a computer scientist, Matteo. The other one is a contemporary Italian literature scholar. And for this project, we are creating a theater play with the aid of ChatGPT. And the goal is the one I was telling you before, that is to investigate from a philosophical point of view the dialogical character of the AI. No? And for this reason, we chose theater, and we decided to create a theater play in order to investigate 2 points, basically. The role of the AI, and in particular of large language models inside the university. So for teaching, doing research, writing dissertations, so the chances and the risks that this implies, no? And the role of AI in the creation process, so in writing a theater play. And the two elements intertwine because the project is made of 2 stages. In the first stage, we asked different scholars of the University of Milan to interact with ChatGPT. They could ask all questions that they wanted, and they built conversation with it. And in the second stage, we gave all these dialogues to ChatGPT itself and asked ChatGPT to transform these dialogues into a theater show. So now we have just completed the first stage, that of the interaction between different scholars of our university and ChatGPT, and we are starting the second stage, that is that of a drama production. And indeed, it's turning out to be quite a comic play, not so much because we decided this in advance, but rather because ChatGPT turned out to be rather a comic character. Because in the interactions, the different professors, the different scholars address ChatGPT with a lot of questions, and they often try to make him give a wrong answer, no? To fail. So we had this idea of we had this idea of representing ChatGPT as a student with big glasses, male student, because he's a little bit dumb, and he's always very keen to answer all sorts of questions in a very, very long way, but not with very effective answers. And we divided the scenes into 3 parts that correspond more or less to 3 types of dynamics that we found. The first stage is a very classical dynamic between a professor and student, because the professor finds out that the student doesn't know a certain subject, and he or she blames the student for that. This has happened, for example, with the professor of German, because he asked ChatGPT to produce a certain type of German poetic verse, and ChatGPT tried, but was not successful, and at the end it looks like a little bit annoyed. Of course, ChatGPT cannot get annoyed, but this is what it looked like. And the same happened with the rector of the university, now ex-rector. He's a philosopher, and he criticized ChatGPT for a few things that it said about philosophy. And anyway, this was the more classical part. But then there were also some episodes that were more strange and more disquieting, because ChatGPT started to invent the answers. And it did it in a very convincing way. For example, there was a professor of history, a woman, And she was studying a very interesting woman anarchist of the 19th century, Leda Raffanelli. And she asked ChatGPT whether it had heard about her. And ChatGPT started to show the information that it could collect about this historical character. And at a certain point, it said that she was one of the first women to use tattoos. Now, our colleague was enthusiastic. She said, "Oh, that's wonderful. I didn't know this. Tell me more about it." Super interesting. But then she started to ask more, and ChatGPT confessed that it was not true, that she did not have any tattoos. So it had invented everything. So we will never know why it invented this, but it did so in a very, very convincing way. So this is the second, the hallucinations. Now we were talking about this before. ChatGPT is a student who never says, "I don't know the answer," no? But rather it invents. And then there is also a third part that we found. And in this part, the student, so ChatGPT, stops answering, stops working. And the professor cannot blame it, but rather she or he has to invent new ways to make it work. This happened with a professor of contemporary art. He pretended to be an artist. And he asked ChatGPT to produce some pictures of his installations. And he described this installation and said, "It was me and my girlfriend staying naked at the entrance of the gallery, one facing the other, and the public has to pass through our two bodies." Of course, you recognize it's a reference to a famous performance by Marina Abramovic. ChatGPT, of course, didn't know. Anyway, what happened was that ChatGPT said, "Oh no, I'm sorry, no, I cannot generate this picture. There is a technical problem." And it didn't explain why. This was very fun, no? And of course, the reason had to do with the limits that are inserted inside these AI systems, no? So the professor asked, "Can you represent the same characters maybe in underwear?" And then the student, ChatGPT, said again, "No, I'm sorry, I can't." "Can you represent them maybe in their swimming costumes?" "No, neither this is possible, sorry." And so they went on. It was very funny. And at the end, the professor managed to make ChatGPT produce the picture with the two characters in their swimming costumes, but the AI inserted a wall between them. And the professor said, "Hey, there is a wall. Take away this wall." And ChatGPT said, "Okay, I'm doing it. Look, I have done it." But the wall was still there. So it was very, very fun. So the big question is this: how is it possible for the character of the professor, that is for the human, to take the challenge and overcome the cliches and the limits of the eye, to find some interesting elements in it? Because this is what the artists that I presented in the first part of the talk have been doing. No? Now, for the moment, in this theater play, we are going more in the direction of the other type of art that I was saying at the beginning. So the one that exposes the dangers of the art. No? But there was a sprinkle of a second type of art, maybe for the moment. I can finish with this to give you a note of hope. Because when we asked ChatGPT to build the scene of the history professor, the one with the anarchist, we didn't give ChatGPT the entire dialogue, but only some elements of it. So we described it in the prompt. But I think that ChatGPT misunderstood what we wrote, and it added an element that acquired some sense for us, but that we could not have thought of. It represented not ChatGPT, but the history professor having an hallucination. So the history professor sees in this scene that ChatGPT produced, she literally sees the anarchist that she's studying and talks to her. And the description of this hallucination was good because, of course, this is in Italian, but I'm describing it to you. Because it gave us the idea of how university researchers, so all of us, sometimes we identify with the authors that we are studying because we are not sure, maybe deep inside, that our research is being completely useful, perhaps. And we idealized these figures, but on the contrary, did something great. So before I hallucinate maybe Benjamin or Turing, I stop and I give the floor to your questions.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm familiar with a lot of the references you make because I do art history and contemporary art. And so it's wonderful to hear these references, and Turing is all folded in there, you know, in terms of the play, for example, and the dialogue and the fantasy of the dialogue. I wonder if you could say something more about the question of attention, because I thought that was a really interesting node that we could return to, because there are different kinds of attention that are solicited from humans and different kinds of attention that humans are desiring from the machine. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about the way attention is a concern here in artistic practice, because art is also supposed to command a certain kind of attention. So there isn't one kind of attention. Attention has qualities or characters. And I wonder if you could say something about how.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, because when we talk about attention, for example, when we say, pay attention, no? But attention is not always intention, no? So I think what is interesting of art made with AI is that it's one of the different ways, not the only way, but one of the ways artists have to renounce of a part of control, no? So to lose a little part of their control over their attention process, no? And this is very important. And so the attention that arises results from the fact that you lose partially your usual attention. You give the machine a capacity, you call it attention, but of course when we talk about machines, we know that all words have similarities and difference. But we give the machine the chance to elaborate and focus on some aspects that we cannot know at the beginning, because it's true. Machines have biases, have filters that come from our data, but have also deep neural networks with high complexity inside that leads partially to unpredictable results, also in the way they identify things and they focus on things, no? So we give up a part of our usual attention, and we find again, I think, a different attention that has to do with the way the machine has focused on things. And this helps maybe to integrate these two types of attention. A type of attention that you say, okay, and it's intentional, I have to pay attention, and the part of attention that is less intentional, no? Like the one that the one Benjamin talks about when he says when he talks about architecture, no? You go through a place and there is a different type of attention that is like a tactile and distracted attention, no?
So yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah, thank you.
More questions? Yeah.
I was noticing that throughout the presentation, it's all like AI in the hands of artists. But I was wondering what you thought about like the use of AI to bypass the artist, which I think is probably more common, especially among like corporations that are looking for like AI advertisements and like selling AI art.
Thank you for this question. It allows me to all the attention of people was on AI as an artist. So on the ability of AI of making art. when the famous first picture by AI called Comte de Bellamy was sold, no? There was this signature that was by an AI. And so the message was, look, AIs can make art. AIs will replace humans. Creativity of AI is amazing. So, but I think there are two levels of my answer. First level, I think this way of considering things, luckily, is changing, because when we start to know more and more about these art practices, we see that it's not AI alone making art. AI alone would never make art, no? For the moment. I don't know. The future is unknown for the moment. The second level of answering this question is that there is, of course, a huge danger in the way companies use this element in the form of this. You can find applications online through which you can make your own art through AI. No, this, of course, is a huge economic speculation. No, because everything is ready-made, so even the prompts are ready-made. You can find even the ready-made prompts, because there are prompts that correspond to very popular pictures. So you pick up a popular prompt and you obtain a popular picture, and it's your own creation. And this is it's very dangerous, but I think it corresponds to a tendency. I was reading about, maybe it's a little bit out of the discourse, but I was reading David Walter's book, Digital Plenitude. And there is a very interesting part that talks about our tendency of romanticizing and modernizing, if we want, all these products that, in a certain sense, for conservative artists, they are not art anymore, but everyone tends to romanticize and say that they are art. So there is this tendency, and this involves our own idea of art and creativity, which is, of course, a very, very, very difficult question, because I think the suggestion that Walter gives is stop having this very romanticized idea of art and see what you can do of meaningful, of creative inside every field. You know, I like this aspect of Walter's book, but this romantic idea of art is very, very hard to overcome. So yeah, one of the uses, real commercial uses, is use AI to obtain an art product, a ready-made art product, no? Of course, this is not the interesting part, according to my point of view.
Thanks.
Thank you for this very inspiring talk. I understand your presentation as that kind of a dialogic structure between a human and AI is a new form of human experience and creative process. I think the way I was inspired by the way you asked the questions, because I just came back from a conference, as you know, that people are not asking these questions. People are asking questions like, well, why does ChatGPT hallucinate? Why can they represent the world more accurately, like we want it to be? Or the question is like, why does the AI have that kind of limitation or fundamentally different from how human mind works, right? But I think you turn the table around by saying that now, if we just think about how we can interact with AI differently and create a new experience, that itself is a creative process instead of that. I think you asked a brilliant question. Basically, that's my comment.
Thank you. So my answer can only be thank you, because yes, you got the point completely. This of reflecting on our possible creative interactions with the AI, because this means also to reflect on what AI is today, because it's true that AI is an instrument that tends to increase its autonomy, more and more. So very often the speculations are, what will AI be in the future? No? And this is important because autonomy is the aspect that makes it something different, from a piano or from a paintbrush. But yeah, the main question, according to my point of view, must be, what can we do with the grade of autonomy that we have now? So,
and it's very new, right? It could only be possible because the generative AI.
Yeah.
Right. The generative AI, especially large language models, only came to existence only 2 years, 3 years ago. And in this short amount of time, we are now, and more of us are now experiencing how to interact with large language model or generative AI in so many ways. And, and on YouTube videos, you have enormous amount of video with the set of the prompts you can use. And in our school of engineering, they have a class called prompt engineering. So they are trying to formulate this kind of human AI interaction experience without thinking the questions you are asking here. So I think this is really interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also have a question. In terms of the big question, can AI replace human beings? I think my first impulse is, philosophically speaking, this question doesn't make sense. Because in terms of self-reflexivity, basically, as artificial intelligence, AI, is only giving us a mirror image of our representation of the human and of the world. So the question should be, when we ask the question, can artificial intelligence replace a human? The question should be, what is the idea of a human we have that can be replaced? Exactly. So basically, the question is about what we are and how we represent ourselves. But since the question has been raised, it means there is something at stake, so something is going on. I don't think it's the modification of the human in itself. I think maybe it goes a little bit in that direction. It's more about the modification, transformation of an entire sphere of perception. So what is going on? And this is not the first time it happened. So there are many things are new and are disruptive, as Silicon Valley people like to name them. They are very disruptive. But what is going on is that we have technologies through which we mediate our relation, our perception of the world. And it happened with the printing press. It happened many times in history. It's happening again. And these things usually go together with some instability. For a while, we have to deal with that. We have to try to understand what do we do with that. Political instability, social instability, theoretical instability. It can last few decades. It can go through very horrific experience. I think fascism was an experience to try to find some stability because a new media were invented, radio, cinema, and so on. Propaganda. So basically, the way I read your work, and I think this is the Benjaminian term that you are giving to your reflection, is basically to what extent art is helping us to better understand, in terms of a self-reflexivity, with what is going on with our perception. Mm-hmm. How do we perceive the world? Yeah. And basically, we are in a learning process. This is my question. So we are a little bit lost in a learning process in which we have to try to make sense to a modified experience. So the old repertoire, the old canon does not work. I think for some reason, for this reason, some people think, oh, abolish the canon, abolish universe, abolish everything. Basically, they are just addressing the same crisis in a very dramatic and nihilistic way, but it's the same thing. So we cannot abandon anything, but for sure, we are addressing a very interesting, stimulating, and dangerous moment in which, to use a term of the phenomenology, that the Weltbild is changing, and we don't know what the new Weltbild looks like. And the question is, yes, we have art, but probably it's also what should we do with these institutions that we call higher education or university? How can education be adequate to this new task? That is basically help us to navigate through huge instability and uncertainties. Yeah, I know. It's more in the form of a comment than a question. I apologize, but I just wanted to share ideas.
I agree very much, and you give me the opportunity maybe to finish answering to the student there, because she told me you are talking only of AI in the hands of artists, no? And it's also a good remark, because you got my idea. My idea is not that art is more important, but that art gives you an example of an interaction between humans and this new technology that has to do with not only with art, but really like for Benjamin, in the work of art in the age of its mechanical reproduction, really with the way we perceive the world, no? And this is something that doesn't concern only art, but concerns also what we're going to do with our knowledge, our way of interacting with the world. So this is very important to me. Sometimes this discourse of art and artificial intelligence tends to be very limited to the sphere of art, in the sense, who is the real author, or who is it a real artwork? Yes, these are important questions, but from my point of view, art is in Italian we say una palestra, no? It is an example that allows you to think about your interaction with your representations and your words. So this is important.
Let someone else go first. I have other questions.
Yeah. We have a Stephen, and I saw Jessica.
And Robert had his hand up.
Okay. Oh, over there. Sorry, but so
you have to look down this way sometimes.
Yes, you're right. Sorry. Yeah. So who was first? Robert?
Robert was before me, but
okay.
I'm also fine with Jennifer before.
Okay, thank you for your help.
Well, this is line of sight. And
I'll ask you later. It was about subjectivity. I'll ask you later.
Well, thank you so much for the presentation. My question follows very much on what you just ended on there, and I'm wondering about what is the concept of art that you're working with here? And that sounds like a kind of very grand philosophical question, but just at a pragmatic and methodological level, how one is distinguishing in this art from non-art. Because a sort of theme that, if I'm understanding, I heard under it, is that part of what's interesting perhaps about the question, can AI make art, or what does AI do to art, is that it throws into relief indirectly the fact that the concept of art that we've been working with in a kind of dominant mode at least is itself inadequate. So it reveals that humans don't make art in the sense that is being deployed, which is generating the anxiety around whether AI. So by that, I mean specifically the idea of like an isolated individual who through a purely creative act that can be distinguished from its social context is not merely aggregating other people's work. So that all these notions around individuality, creativity, inspiration, the distinction of myself from my world, that is bound up in the concept, a certain modern and arguably very kind of individualistic, bourgeois, capitalist conception of art, that is false, and that gets revealed by the fact that our anxieties about AI is that it can't do that, which merely reveals that we can't do that. And so this is one of the subtexts I saw underneath. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but I'm curious what you think of that.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, it's completely correct. In fact, one of the first things that struck me when I started to deal with AI art was the fact that the objections that were made really revealed a persistent romantic idea of art, when all the 20th century has been a whole century in which this romantic and individualistic and all powerful idea of the artist has been criticized, no? So you wouldn't need AI art in order to criticize this idea of art. You have had a whole century. But this probably means that this romantic idea is so resistant that it resurfaces continuously. And AI becomes, from this point of view, one of the ways that you have in order to criticize this idea and to show that art has to do with interaction with something other than yourself, no? With loss of control, for example. And in the case of AI, maybe here I'm a little bit too idealistic, but I think that in the case of AI, you have also the element of an instrument that has its own way of elaborating information. So something similar to someone who speaks another language, and you have to pay attention to this way of elaborating. So I think it can be also an exercise in listening to other languages, other ways of elaborating the word that can apply, for example, to animals, to strangers, or so it can. I think it can help. So I don't know if I answered.
Okay, I think you were first.
Yeah. Then I have Steven, Jennifer, Maria. Correct? Did I miss this? No. Okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, first of all, thank you for your presentation. A lot of this was stuff that I had never been familiarized with before, so it was very helpful. It seems like a lot of the art that you went over, a lot of the art that utilizes AI calls attention to, or at least utilizes the AI's inability, I guess, to properly perform humanity. For example, in the improbotics example, its inability to gesture, or in its conversations with the professor and students, its inability to say, I don't know. I'm curious, as the technology behind this improves, and as its ability to perform humanity improves in a scenario that does happen, does the understanding of AI need to adapt to that, or is it something that is fluid?
This is a good question. So the question, basically, if I understood well, is because I was showing you all examples in which mistakes are very important, no? So if the technology improves and mistakes disappear, how will you be able to use these mistakes or to? I don't think I think I can answer in two steps. The first step is that to use the mistakes of AI is a choice that the human artists made. Because if you want already now, you can use AI in a way that it doesn't make mistakes. You know? For example, the pictures by Sofia Crespo, she was really looking for these mistakes, no? Because if you want, you can produce very, very realistic pictures. We were talking yesterday, maybe it was not yesterday, about these fake photographs that were made with AI, no? They look like real photographs. So if you want, you can use AI without it makes mistakes, you know? It's a choice to use the mistakes. And so I think that this practice of using the differences and the mistakes will remain. Probably the modality will change because the types of mistakes will change. For example, when the first theater plays were produced with AI, there was a Czechish play, and there was another example by an Estonian playwright, and they were very different because they sounded a little bit like Beckett plays. Because these conversations had no sense at all, no? And now you don't get this anymore, no? Because it's not what you get. You get things that are not quite right from the point of view of emotional settings emotional understandings, and will this change as well? So. Probably yes, we will get AIs that will be more capable of imitating the human emotions in a right way, no? But there will be other types of differences for sure, because I think the main point is that AI always has similarities with us, but also always has differences. If we think of so-called artificial general intelligence, no? So this idea of AI that would become like us, capable of have feelings, understanding different aspects of having experience and so on. What would it mean for an AI to have all this? I think it will mean something different from us. So what would mean for an AI to have a conscience? Maybe we will approach something similar, but it will also be something different, no? So I think this play between similarity and difference will remain and will be always very, very important, because if you have no difference and you have no distance, you have no play, no? So in order to play, you need a difference, you need a distance. So it will be other types.
Stephen?
I'm going to ask a cranky, overly romantic, anxious question. Because I feel like there haven't been enough of them. So I appreciate the question about corporation. I felt that was approaching the level of crankiness that I want to see in the world. So your example drawn from the your passage about the electric monk, and specifically the idea of labor saving that comes up in that passage, reminded me of probably the most technophobic piece of literature that I've read, which is a piece by E.M. Forster in, I think, 1909, called The Machine Stops. I don't know if anyone's read this, but it's very good science fiction, very early science fiction. And as I understand that story, E.M. Forster is expressing an anxiety about technology becoming so dominant in relation to the human body that human beings over-rely on machines, and then essentially they turn into mush. And the machine does everything for the body, And the body loses all of its skill, it loses all of its abilities and muscle and so on. And I think he says it becomes white pap. He's, talking about white people in this machine. So bodies become white pap. And the sort of polemical upthrust of the story arrives in a phrase that the narrator produces and I think champions, which is the phrase that sin against the body. Essentially, machines and over-reliance on machines have resulted in a sin against the body. And by over-relying on machines, we are sinning against the body rather than allowing the body to do all sorts of work that it is fit to do. So I guess my cranky, overly romantic, anxious question is, aside from concerns about biases or surveillance or even corporate commodification, I'm wondering if you see in any of the examples that you've encountered, or rather just if you consider when you think about AI, whether there is a sin against the body taking place. And so I have my own, rough answer to that based on what I've seen, but I wanted to put the question to you. So if there is a sin against the body occurring in this new landscape, what is it?
Okay, let me see if I understood your question well. You are thinking, for example, of cyborg imaginations, all these cases in which body and machine melt. And,
sure.
For example,
right. The example in the story is that people are essentially in a machine, and the machine ferries them around, and they do nothing, and they become weaker as the machine does everything.
Okay. Maybe I'm too optimistic. I'll try to give you an answer.
I think you are. I think you're optimistic, and that's okay.
I'm optimistic. No. From the point of view of the body, I'm optimistic in this sense. But it seems to me, I studied it a little bit also in relation to VR. No, there was a moment in which, in the 90s, we started to think that with VR, we were going to melt reality and fiction, no? This is another aspect that I like from Voltaire. Maybe it's a moment in which I'm fixed on Voltaire's writings, but he teaches in Georgia Tech, so I don't know. It was very interesting, and he explains. Okay, this was the imaginary in the 90s. So the imaginary that gave birth also to all those movies like Matrix and Strange Days and so on, was that we were going to lose completely the difference between reality and fiction, no? But this didn't happen. So we have virtual reality now, and we have reality, we have augmented reality, and we are perfectly able to play with virtual reality without losing any limit, any difference between virtual reality and fiction. And I think the same has happened a little bit with this idea of fusion between the body and the machine, because what I see now is not so much fusion between body and machine. For example, with Aika, you don't have a melting. You have a difference. This is the opposite, no? So you have, if you look at that picture, there's Klingemann looking like this at Aika. There is the Klingemann, the artist, who is sitting and he's facing Aika and he's looking directly to Aika. And there's the difference. Here's the dog and the machine, and here's the man, no? And as I was saying, the difference and the distance becomes the condition for the play to take place. And I think we are going more in this direction because, for example, one of the fields on which a colleague of mine, she's very good, she's working on embodiment of AIs, no? So rather than empowering my body with machines inside my body, giving value to my body and trying to give to the poor AI a little bit of this embodiment that we are so lucky to have, no? Apparently they are trying to make AIs with sensors and so AIs that can explore the world. For example, in Goodman on the road, the AI is on the top of the car. It can explore a little bit. It has a little bit of connection to the external world. From the point of view of viewers, of course, when they are embodied, these AIs, we interact much better with them. But I think the direction is more this, giving value to our own body and see if the poor machines can be a little bit more embodied. Of course, they will never be embodied like we are, because they will be embodied in different ways. And there will be always this distance. I think this imagination of a fusion between machine and human body is declining. I think it's becoming less important. This is my impression.
Thanks.
Jennifer, no, there's
Well, my question
Jennifer.
is a little bit back to this question of attention or belief, maybe, and subjectivity, and thinking about how how would one write a philosophy around artificial intelligence if one is trying to think about consciousness or cognition, right? And it made me think about the way so many philosophical writers have to come up with a metaphor for consciousness in order to then be able to perform certain actions on that metaphor to explain it, whatever it is, whether it's categories or some other kind of metaphor. And I wondered if in your research and thinking from a philosophical perspective, you would like to speculate on metaphors that could emerge around the forms of AI, emergent forms of AI and cognition, because we've shifted from symbolic AI, which had a very specific model, right? Symbolic AI had, these were the pieces you were working with, and it had a very architectonic kind of structure. But with neural nets and with this new kind of pattern matching that's so dense, what are you seeing as emergent metaphors for that? Do you think that are useful or maybe not so useful that you've encountered, like from a more philosophical academic?
This is a very difficult question. I can try to say something, but I think it's a part that I haven't investigated so well yet. So if you have also ideas, that would be useful. Yeah, for sure, deep neural networks have a completely different model of learning, no? A model that is closer to ours. Once again, different, very different, but for certain aspects, closer. And what strikes me is that I was thinking recently about large language models, and I was thinking of the fact that their universe is made of words. No, for a philosopher, this is incredible because they have no experience beyond the words. No, so but nevertheless, I read an article that came out a few months ago that said that inside this world, all made of words, they are managing to find a kind of orientation. I don't know if you saw that article, in space and in time. So it means that, their world is made of words, but they are not just putting the words together in the most probable way, but we are probably building a world with these words. And this is very, very, very interesting. I don't know where it can bring, but yeah, for a philosopher, it's very interesting because I don't know. I have no conclusion about that. But for sure, there is an increasing integration also between aspects of cognition, so words, pictures, words and picture. It has been a very, very recent and important integration, no? So if you start to integrate the world of words with the world of pictures, probably they can become able to, I don't know, to have a consensus. I don't know, because we should define what the consensus is, but to have an orientation inside these words, probably yes. We should understand how to think about these categories.
And whether it's like a surreal structure or not, maybe. Maybe there's a surreal structure that's part of that, right?
Yeah.
Things that don't map onto our normal day. But more surreal. I was thinking about surrealists, you know,
Yeah.
right? And that odd juxtapositions that are purposefully made, and then AI producing similar kinds of accidental
Yeah.
forms. Okay, I'm done.
We have Maria.
Yes, thank you so much for this talk. I enjoyed also having some possibility instead in the world of AI, which usually either I don't understand anything or I'm afraid of it. So thank you so much for that. And my question actually followed from Stevens about the body, because I think you've already answered to the first part of the question, which was not so much can we give a consciousness to AI or can we give a body? And it comes, I mean, you already answered to that with the, but it came because one of my favorite, I thought all this art that you showed was really interesting, but one of my favorites was the improv-robotics, because I thought it's really fascinating, the idea that they are doing the improv with an earpiece, and then you don't know, you have to say you can get, but their bodies have to respond and translate that into body gestures and I thought maybe what I really find fascinating in your approach is that we are not looking so much about to how the human gets absorbed in the machine, let's say, or how the machine becomes a tool for the human, but what happens in the environment and what kind of phenomenon in the world is being created. So like what Barale called an interaction. There is something happening there that is, and I wonder. What I'm really interested in is in the embodied part of it. What kind of thing is happening there, where it's not just a brain, a mind. Because when I interact with a ChatGPT or something, I feel like it's a mind and I'm thinking. Of course, I have a body. ChatGPT doesn't have one. But if we start thinking that I have to embody that, but then if I respond with my body, what happens if ChatGPT could kind of take into account that interaction? That's the step forward that I was wondering if you had any thoughts.
Yeah, this is very important, I think, because we have a body, So when we interact with a body. And those also this idea of improvisation, It's very important for the improvotics. It's very important, I think, because when we interact with the AI, we have to improvise. Then maybe we can transform this into a work, but it's not improvisation. But we improvise, and we always improvise with a body. But you were asking if the AI, this is a question that one of these two colleagues of the project always asks. If also the AI could interact through a body, this is your question.
Yeah,
this would be interesting because this colleague always says, how is it possible that we pass from ChatGPT, that is just this very, very poor text, all white and black, and then we pass from this to these avatars with super sexy voices and beautiful faces who take care of your feelings. And so my colleague says, why can't we not have something in the middle? So I don't want to interact with ChatGPT with all this very boring black and white. And so that would be interesting. I have a colleague who studies the influence that the embodiment of AI has on the interaction with humans. And she says that it's very important that when the AI, in her case, they are artistic AIs. So they draw or they sing, they play instruments. And she said that when they are embodied, the interaction with humans becomes much, much more effective. But when I asked her, okay, the interaction with the human, but from the point of view of AI, is there a change? And she said, in the examples that I'm considering, not. So probably there can be embodiments of AI that can impact also on the AI's way of functioning. But in our way of interacting, for sure. Yeah.
Just is there any connection now with like robotics work that was not AI? Like, you don't work with Suchman and
No?
Castaneda. They have this article on Dutch technologies on robots. So they talk about these little robots that have like a whole body that can sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if there's any communication between the development of AI and that kind of sensorial machines. But
no, I would
just
be interested. If you want to send me or to write me down
the article, but
the reference, I would be interested. Yes.
So we have 5 people. So I think it's time to collect at least the 2 questions. We have a E and U. I don't know your name. Sorry. I think you were first, and then you.
So gray shirt first,
Gray shirt, yes.
and then white shirt.
Yes, and then white shirt. Sorry. So E and then the gray.
I'll try to be brief. Thank you so much for your talk. So I also have a question about subjectivity. Perhaps it's a Benjaminian question. So I was really interested when you said that AI can allow us to perceive aspects of our reality that we otherwise wouldn't, or that were previously out of reach. I guess my question is just, who is the subject who's doing this perception? And it's sort of similar to the question, Robert's question around art, the concept of art. Like, does this require us to rethink what the subject is? While you were speaking, I was thinking a lot about Benjamin's idea of the optical unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
And there seems to be a parallel going on here. You know, with Benjamin, photography allows us to perceive things in our environment, urban environment, that aren't being consciously processed by the senses. It seems like AI, particularly with media through art, is allowing us to do something like this. But of course, the question is, whose unconscious is this? Is this even a human unconscious? Of course it is, but if it's much more mediated than Benjamin could have foreseen. So I guess my question is, philosophically, what demands does this place on the theory of subjectivity, and particularly a political conception of subjectivity? I mean, Benjamin's so committed to this Marxist idea of like a new collective body, and I wonder if, I don't know, if there's a similar demand being placed on it.
Yes, I think so.
Just a second. We have a second question.
Okay, we collect questions.
The gentleman with a gray shirt.
Basically, I'm also wondering how much things kind of won't change even with this. That like we thought, like, oh, social media, like it's going to fundamentally change society, and it did change society, but a lot of the stuff stayed kind of generally the same. Like, we're going to live in the metaverse. Not really, because you're still going to live in the real world. That's just, but basically I was wondering, the AI lies to you, but then like Mark Zuckerberg lied to you. And you go way back, you get Brocknar, who also lied to you. How much does this just going to be the same stuff done differently?
What is going to change? This is the question.
Like, how much is it not going to change? Do you think it's really like you're just going to see some of this? That somewhere down the line we're going to be seeing some new existentially changing technology. Like, oh, is it going to change this, or is it going to be end up how like AI did, where it changed a bit, but it's still fundamentally the same?
Okay, I understand. So first question, the idea of optical unconscious, there is a strong connection, of course. And you're right when you say that something changes as well when because they asked me, what is the difference with Benjamin's optical unconscious? The difference is that the AI elaborates in a way that is partially autonomous with information, while the camera doesn't. So you're right, there is a difference. You say mediation. I don't know if it's, we can say mediation, but this introduces an element, I think, that is a social element that was not present inside the optical unconscious, because I tried to say this before. It's an element of listening, because since the AI has its own way of elaborating information, you have to listen to this way of elaborating information. And this has a parallel to the attention that you should pay to the other people's way of elaborating information. So I think it can have a collective consequence from this point of view. This is my idea. I don't know if it's clear. And the other question is very difficult. What is going to change in our lives? I'm very happy that nothing changed in the way they said. So this is good for me. I think something is going to change for sure. For example, my kids are doing their homework with ChatGPT, but for example, there are weird examples, because my kid does the homework with ChatGPT when he wants to do a bad homework. He says, I don't want that professor knows that I didn't do the homework, and I don't want that she thinks that I copied it from someone else. So I'll do it with ChatGPT in order to obtain something very mean. And he does that. So something is changing, but we still don't know how. My idea is that you should not think of abrupt one change, of something that changes abruptly, but of a very gradual change. There is a work by Kingeman that is called I don't know how it goes, but it's a video that changes very, very slowly, moves the parts of this college very, very slowly, and gives the idea of AI as an unperceptible change. So I think we should think things this way, and this allows us to also to do something, because if we stay there and we expect what will change completely, we don't do anything, So, yeah.
I think the gentleman with the white shirt, and then Bart.
Yes, this is sort of building off the previous two questions as well about, or three questions about this kind of like question about like human computer interaction, or like, is there a kind of a co-creative space that's made, this kind of interaction, or, and then like what's going to change, and is it going to change perceptibly or imperceptibly? And it goes back to this question about like the machine in the body. And earlier I was originally formulating my question in response to you mentioning that like you were seeing actually kind of like folks are moving away from being interested in the machine and the body becoming more connected. But I was surprised to hear that, because you're working on these dialogical projects where like the AI is becoming involved in like the process of forming thoughts. So I just didn't know how you thought about, I want to hear more about how you thought about like involving artificial intelligence in the human like ecology of conversation structure, and this kind of like thought forming process in your dialogical like theories.
Let me see if I got your question. You are asking.
We have another question first.
Oh,
sorry. But otherwise there is no time.
Hi. So I kind of wanted to ask a question, if you maybe, like, I was interested to hear more about this sort of alienating effect that AI can have in how we also then perceive the world, but can teach us something about how we can perceive the world differently. And this kind of comes to me through like a different artwork that probably people aren't too aware of. It's not super well known, but it's not made by AI. And it is also based on the Pygmalion, I don't know how to pronounce it, the Bernard Shaw piece, which this artist then found copyright. It's been translated to many languages, and she gave it to people who were native speakers. So it's really about language, about English. That's a global language. So this play is translated into these different languages. Then she asked people from native speakers of that language to translate it back to English. And then it was made into a play again and performed by actors as, a new version basically of the play.
Okay.
And my question is kind of to what extent is the alienating effect that you're talking about in AI similar or different from this kind of alienating effect that can be created actually by humans, by using sort of human intelligence here, but through, also some kind of filter, as naming the filter of translation in this case. So maybe this is also a question really about to what extent is the kind of alienating effect of AI an effect of really some sort of fundamentally different understanding that is an artificial intelligence, or is it sort of a product of multiple layers of translation, for instance, or is it some kind of effect of aggregated knowledge, something like this? If that makes sense.
Difficult questions. So the first question, let me know if it's correct. You are asking why are you saying that the tendency of melting the body and the machine is diminishing is if you are studying the interaction between machine and humans. Because I think that these are two different things. I think that in order to have an interaction, you have to have a distance. I think that the imagination of the cyborg had to do more with the overcoming of the distance. No? So there are two cases in which you are less afraid of something. No? That can be through overcoming the difference. So you become part of this thing that you're afraid of, or you can keep the distance and the difference and play with it. So maybe this is Benjamin again, no? Because when Benjamin talks about the second type of technique, he says that the possibility of play is based on keeping a distance. Because distance in this case is also a kind of respect. So you keep the distance, you respect the other entity, because it's an entity, it's not an animal, and then you can play. So this is my point of view. I don't know if I understood. And then your question is, yes, it's important what you say. I think one of the mistakes that are being made when we speak of AI art is that of thinking that AI allows to make something that didn't exist before. This is not so. Let's think of experiments that have been done now with automatic writing or combinatory writing in the 60s. Calvino, already in the 60s, was talking about the possibility of making literature through recombining words. Because he said, we never invent things. We recombine words in this case that already exist. Of course, we should recombine them in such a way that something that we could not see before emerges. No? And this was not with AI. No? But through this discourse, we started to talk about AI. So AI works in the same way, and it takes up in all the experiments that I have shown some very important art experiments that have been made during the 20th century. Because sometimes we say, wow, AI, it's all new. No, it's not all new. They are all experiments that we make after a certain history. So this idea of mediation, recombination, criticism against the individual creator, was not born with the AI. No, AI can become an instrument to work in a new way on these issues.
Okay, we have a time for the last two questions of Pranav and myself. A very short question. It's like almost a comment. I take my privilege as a moderator to ask about because it's about the distance. I think this is the point. I think what is scary for a lot of people who are talking about artificial intelligence is that there is no distance. Is that artificial intelligence can become intelligent, can have a conscience, and so on. But Benjamin's point is that no, the distance is you cannot overcome this distance because we don't know what the hell is a human. We don't know what is a body. We don't know what is consciousness. We don't know what is reality. We don't know these terms exceeds our capability of understanding, and even we cannot even conceptualize these terms. And because of this excess, there is always distance, and the distance keep open possibilities. This is where it's not that Benjamin is optimistic and no, he sees possibilities in this gap, in this distance, and for that reason, the question, as I said, my first question. So artificial intelligence cannot replace the human because we don't know what is the human. So just for that reason. And the best that this technology can help us to do is to better understand the meaning of human, and that is a field full of possibilities, but concrete possibilities, not just made up possibilities. But to do that is crucial to keep open that the distance, and I think this is how I see the debates diverge. I think people who are scary, they think that this distance can disappear. Yeah, I would say philosophically it cannot disappear. Just I'm very confident that there is no way you can overcome that distance.
Okay, all right. So I will. This was very interesting. The conversation, I think, prompted me to ask or just comment on the way in which, you ended and we all focused on the theatrical aspect. Theater as a particular site for this kind of experimentation is very interesting. I think you're right that the pretense component of modern generative AI is one of its powers, right? That you can, this is how you're supposed to do prompt engineering. You're supposed to tell it, you are a blah, 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 right? And that helps to focus it in a way. So I totally understand that. I think what's interesting is maybe this relates to that concept of distance. There is another interpretive layer in many of these, like the improbotics, and maybe in your own play, which is that ultimately this will be acted by embodied humans, right? Yes. And so that kind of interpretation, to your point about nothing being new, that happens with words on a page anyway, right? So in some sense, the act of writing was a way of taking, drama, which was inherently embodied, experiential, and oral, and turning it into this simulacrum, right? Mm-hmm. But then that led to this real birth of possibility for people to interpret it as they like. And so I think that was something that I was trying to wrestle with throughout your discussion about it, which is that, well, is it really that the generative AI is doing anything here? Or is it that you called this more of a real dialogue? And it's not really. It's like in the same way that when you interpret any kind of, and you interpret Ionesco or Beckett, you have to try to make sense of the insensible. That act is inherently the creative act, it seems to me, in the robotics performance, and not what's in your ear.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're right, completely. So the creative act is the sense that you make out of the AI lines. And I think this is a very powerful example of what it should happen in our usual use of AI, no? Because we should make sense of what comes out, which is often a lot of rubbish, no? And sometimes we can make sense out of it. Some parts at least. Yeah.
And that's why I was suggesting maybe there's a particular kind of attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is emerging.
Yes.
Around the kinds of creative actions or AI demands from us, like UNESCO.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Right. And it's like, oh, how does now my brain has to work differently to incorporate the absurdist or or hallucinogenic elements, or look at the image of the mouse with 7 ears, right? What kind of what new attention does that create?
Yeah.
In the perceiver, the one who's creating the consciousness from that. Yeah.
And I have doubts, but I don't know, it's really a hypothesis, that a shared attention with more than one people could work even better, because when we were all three colleagues together, we picked up things that alone in front of our screen, we cannot. Maybe we become too serious when we are alone in front of our screen. So now I wanted to tell the two guys, okay, we have to meet again. And because when we meet, we pick up things that otherwise we don't pick up. So this is also interesting, because we are used to work on our own, no? The philosopher or the typical humanity scholar works on his own.
In theater, I think like the closer style that is in conversation with is Brecht and like the Verfremdungseffect. Because the whole idea, right, is that the audience is the one doing all of the work. Because it's the act of interpreting and processing it. And the whole thing is to try to make sure that the audience doesn't forget that. So by being lured into the idea that the playwright is doing the art, and that we're just watching it externally, and that we're just like passively taking it in and not engaging it, that's the danger. And so the goal is to try to kind of create a constant awareness that you're watching a play, you are watching the play, and then that's where the critical dimension of art can come in. For that tradition, right, is that the audience members have to constantly be aware that they are participatory actors within this. But the problem is that every style that tries to create that becomes deadened over time, and so it always has to exceed itself. It has to find a new way to keep renewing that experience. And this, what you're describing, seems like that in some ways, but then it quickly gets deadened as soon as it becomes routinized, that people start to think, well, it's the AI that is doing the art. Yeah, I just think that's really
it's true. Yeah, we even thought of using Brecht for fine tuning, but when we tried to do the fine tuning, so giving we tried with Pirandello. Yeah, we didn't try with Brecht. We gave a little passage of Pirandello, but it turned out to be like a side transfer. So it was very, very bad. It was only Pirandello's words used without any sense. But we thought also of Brecht for this reason, that to say that it's very necessary, particularly in this case, to give the audience this awareness of being part of this game, no? Yeah.
Well, game is a great one, because it makes me think of the imitation game, and the connection between the idea of art is, the world. Art is anything you can get away with, because it is, as long as the audience is engaged and thinks of it as art, then it is art, because the point is that it's not inside of the box. It's in the interactive relationship between the reception of it. So it makes it seem like it's part of the imitation games.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about it. Yeah.
Okay. It's the last comment. Yeah. Oh, thank you. There's a lot to think about. I'm glad you mentioned Beckett, who had a character in one of his plays say, "No matter, try again, fail again. Fail better." Maybe I'm thinking it's the human ability to fail that can't be replicated by AI, and that this is an institution that has a bureau of academic success. Who, it may be our ability to fail as Van Gogh failed as Hannah Arendt thought Benjamin failed. That is what will distinguish us and what will perhaps save us.
Yes, I think this is a very important point. Yes.
Thank you so much.